Hi everyone, my name is Anna and I live in the city of York in the UK with my husband Johnny and our dog Pansy. And I work here at York St John University in the events team. Having been a lifelong fan of Eurovision, in many ways the topic of my dissertation had probably already been decided before I even started my masters at the University of York. It was there that I studied an MA in the management of the creative and cultural industries. And personally speaking, I don't think you can get many more things that are more creative and more cultural than the Eurovision Song Contest. As part of this course, I had to make sure that it covered a managerial aspect of the contest. After a fair amount of negotiation, the final title was agreed as Managing the European Utopia, the brand management of the Eurovision Song Contest, and this took the form of a piece of qualitative research. If the truth be told, I set out thinking this would be a fairly straightforward piece of research, and I can absolutely confirm that it was not. From the outset, many different areas which could be associated with brand management emerged. This included the tangible branding, including logos, slogans, the postcards, etc. The long-standing debates about individual and collective and fan identities, alongside the implications of maintaining its original brand values and non-political agenda in today's dramatically changing world and with the emerging new audiences. But firstly, let's have a quick look at the existing literature. Firstly, unlike other mega events such as the Olympics or the World Cup, the purpose and the feeling of those events are universally acknowledged across continents. Sporting occasions which would take place with or without the camera rolling. The academics Diane and Katz stated in 1980 that media events rob society the sense of occasion, with sporting fixtures now watched by people half dressed and half awake. However, Katz clarifies that the Eurovision Song Contest defies his definition of media event, as it still provides a sense of occasion with audience ritual, high drama that are symbolically and emotionally laden performances. But what also separates the Eurovision Song Contest from other mega events is our interpretation of performance, which are framed around our own social, cultural and geopolitical experiences. It is therefore difficult to see how one brand can create such a defined meaning, when the contest means so many different things to so many people. While we know that Eurovision promotes the values of universality, diversity, equality and inclusivity through a proud tradition of celebrating these facets through music, do these words actually mean the same thing to everyone? Certainly, throughout the years as the Song Contest has ventured further east, some have suggested that the Eurovision Song Contest is a vehicle for newer entries to showcase their alignment to westernised liberalisation, providing citizens of these countries with a place in the imagined European community, even if this is at odds with the social and political injustices their citizens are subject to. A key theme throughout the literature relates to Eurovision and its ability to create a European identity. This is a concept which is often up for much debate. What exactly does it mean to be European? Is Eurovision's intent really to create a homogenous community? Or is that diverse community relationship just based on a shared understanding? And then, is that understanding in fact completely imagined, or is it only temporary for the duration of the show each year? In addition, research from Bowman, Sandvoss and Samui Bonici all describe the fondness for nostalgic reflection on long-standing brands, thinking back positively about watching the contest with friends and family, or remember how Eurovision helped to forge a new identity. It is what Hofstede refers to as an invented tradition, where millions of us gather around our TVs, seeing as we can't get tickets, for our annual traditions. This, in turn, can result in an illusion of belonging through media consumption and an ownership of that brand, the Eurovision belongs to me feeling. Eurovision has had a difficult job of retaining existing audiences, maintaining the prestige of a heritage brand while moving forward and embracing new audiences. What is evident now is our increase in social media and the need for endless content has changed the relationship with new immersion audiences, with long-term positioning replaced by accessibility and volume of content. One difficulty that Eurovision faces is that content is driven by the national delegations, whose performances are integral to audience interaction and the future direction of the show. They are capable of making political decisions and have the power to put Eurovision in the press for all the wrong reasons. Critics have often accused the Eurovision Song Contest of reinforcing national caricatures instead of celebrating Europe's diverse communities. Therefore, beyond logos and taglines, is the reputation of the brand actually in the hands of other stakeholders, the national delegations, the performers, the media, and most importantly, the audience. The Eurovision Song Contest has been characterised differently throughout the years, from the serious music competition of the 1950s, the creation of the superstars in the 80s, and the 90s saw the visibility phase, in which there was an open acknowledgement of the sexual and gender diversity within the competition. These changes are reflected in the fluidity of the audience and is a natural transformation of the brand. So while the philosophy of the song contest has always remained the same, perhaps it reflects how it is marketed, the content and its global growth. So while women under 35 are now the most likely group to watch the contest, it is important to avoid stereotyping the Eurovision audience. After all, it is billed as family entertainment and watched by millions across a spectrum of different demographics. So while the long-standing countries involved have an almost passive understanding of the contest's philosophies, how does this translate into new territories that Eurovision is looking to expand into? Can this help to understand why Eurovision Asia failed? And what is the future of Eurovision, the American Song Contest? If fans believe that Eurovision supports cultural unification rooted in European history and tradition, will this lead to the values and purpose of Eurovision becoming obsolete in these new territories? Changing audiences, growth and branding can shift both strategically and organically. For Eurovision, it is clear that a desire for global growth has been driven by strategic goals. But as we know, both music and identity are fluid entities which shift organically throughout time. So let's move on to the interviews. I was lucky enough to have interviewed the following people: 2 academics and authors of Eurovision books, 2 people who identified as mega fans who have engaged all year round and who blog and write about the contest, 2 current employees of the Eurovision Song Contest, and 1 former employee of a national delegation. Here we're going to run through very quickly the takeaway points from the interviews. Firstly, every single participant acknowledged the importance of nostalgia. Everyone could recount fond memories of watching the contest with family and friends a long time ago, something which audiences in new territories would not have. Notably, one participant suggested that the frequency of the contest was important as it was branded as an annual celebration. This was suggested as a reason why the American Song Contest didn't work. In a series format, it was more akin to something like American Idol. In addition, the original contest had entered an unsaturated market in 1956, while now a multitude of song contests exist the world over in various formats. The voting system was also discussed, as voting for another country has the power to encourage open-mindedness, unlike other competitions. With many songs utilising their country's tradition doing particularly well over the years, participants spoke about the importance of authenticity, suggesting that Madonna's performance in 2019 was evidence of the growing commercialisation of the contest, and perhaps even a cynical attempt at appealing to American audiences ready for expansion. One participant reflected how Eurovision allowed him to develop his own identity, reflective of much of the existing literature. And notably, both of the fan interviewees said that not allowing Russia to compete in 2022 was a mistake, stating that for members of the LGBTQ+ community in Russia, Eurovision is potentially their only escape to an alternative reality in which they can be themselves. However, both acknowledged that the pressure from the national delegations and the moral outrage across the world would have meant that not excluding Russia would have harmed the brand in the long run. Every participant noted that the shift in the audience demographics was visible, but that this had not made them feel less of a part of the Eurovision community or damaged the contest's integrity. Most participants believed that the emergence of new audiences did not mean that audience figures in other demographics had decreased. It was more likely the brand was experiencing growth through globalization and social media. One participant suggested that the significance of giving a voice to marginalised groups is lost because there is now so much diversity represented on the stage. Almost all participants agreed that there is no such thing as a collective European identity, but the commonality was an understanding of diversity, which was a core characteristic of the brand. Interestingly, one participant from Armenia discussed how his family are aware that the contest has associations with the LGBTQ+ community, And while this is at odds with their conservative and religious culture, his family engaged in the contest just as an entertaining music competition, devoid of a political or social agenda. He did, however, suggest that he believes that the contest may have tempered their views on the more liberal values in the West. There were some discrepancies about who was driving the brand, with both the fans saying that the power comes from within the Eurovision community, while one academic said that fan culture cannot be the key driver, as the significance of Eurovision across multiple social and political dimensions is far bigger than the fans or fan media intervention, even if it tries to give the perception of bottom-up influence. Another participant said that if the content is created by the national delegations, and national delegations are funded by taxpayers, then clearly it is the audiences who control the Eurovision Song Contest. Cynically, it was suggested that the non-political position of Eurovision was primarily to protect the economic and commercial power of the contest. There is a profound risk of damaging the brand image transfer between sponsors by aligning with one political argument, even if the alternative contradicts the ESC's core values: inclusivity, universality, and celebrating diversity through music. And now, onto the big topic of discussion. Everyone, apart from those who currently work for Eurovision, believed that rapid expansion just would not work. While it was agreed that growth was part of an organic change via the growth in social media, an American Song Contest could not create or promote a new American identity. It cannot provide opportunity for a peek into an unknown culture through songs or to experience a different language. It was suggested that to grow Eurovision within America might be to utilise the LGBTQ+ communities. But this is a strategy which just would not work in East Asia, in which diverse cultures have less of a mutual understanding of one another. So in other words, not enough diversity on one side of the globe and maybe too much on the other, in which to create new successful competitions. Across all participants, it was agreed that new territories could not recreate the traditions and legacy of the original, and therefore will never hold the same gravitas and meaning. While others questioned the viability of expansion, some suggested it was wrong to dismiss these new shows, with other long-standing spin-offs such as Junior Eurovision, Eurovision Young Musicians, Eurovision Dance Contest, and Eurovision Choir. And while they may not attract the same audience numbers as the original Eurovision, they are still important for their cultural exchange and offering a platform for creative producers. One fan participant suggested that if Eurovision is looking to grow, then there is loads of potential already within the metaphorical boundaries of Europe, and more should be done to change passive spectators into engaged fans. Shifts in the way that nations select songs may support growth, while helping to support national festivals, culture and civic pride. Now, there are some obvious limitations with this study. The most obvious being, well, how can you draw conclusions from 7 people regarding a competition that is watched by millions? Well, firstly, I had no idea that this topic had the potential to go down so many avenues. It has highlighted a number of key issues. Who holds the power? What are the limitations of expansion and the role of authenticity in organic and strategic growth? Arguably, each one of these topics and some of the lesser dominant ones could warrant their own studies. So hopefully this study has begun the dialogue for some much larger scale studies. So on that note, I will leave you with some final thoughts from one of the participants. I think the moment Eurovision dies is when there's apathy. And you know, people just aren't bothered anymore. And they are. They are in terms of being fans, but they are in terms of being critics. And that is a really powerful combination. Oh, and here's Pansy dressed ready for Eurovision.